Sir has worked with an energy company in Dubai till 2017, and now he resides in India, particularly in Delhi, and delivers lectures on international relations in Symbiosis International University. Sir, we are very glad to have you here. The present lecture essentially revolves around the changing security dynamics in the Gulf, particularly with the onset of the Gaza war, and how this reshapes India's relations with the Gulf countries, and how these security implications play out for India is the subject of discussion, which Sir will discuss with you all. So, without further ado, I request Sir to please come on the dais and deliver the lectures.
Thank you. Yeah, please.
And this stick you can use for...
Just go forward.
Yeah.
Thank you. Dear faculty members and students of NLU, it's a great pleasure for me to be amongst you and to share with you some personal views relating to this horrendous and tragic events that are taking place at present in West Asia. Many of you would have followed the carnage that has occurred in Gaza and which continues even as I speak to you. My effort will be to place in a broader political perspective what all these events that are taking place. Also share with you some of the implications of these events over the short term and a longer term, and what all this would mean for the world in which we live. As you can imagine, this is an ongoing crisis. Therefore, many of my views are tentative and could evolve over time in response to important developments. Having said this, I should stress the fact that we are living in a world that is an extraordinary churn. A churn that can be replicated, that can recall in itself some of the significant implications of the end of the Cold War. We are living through a period that would be called post-Cold War, or since the Cold War itself was done with some many decades ago, a post-Cold War. We are at the edge of a new world arrangement, a new world order. You will all be part of that. Therefore, it is important for you to appreciate the significance of this specific development and how it fits into the larger framework. I used to use the term a churn in diplomacy or a churn in world affairs, but I no longer believe it's a churn. A churn indicates a kind of ripple. I think it is more a tsunami, and therefore what we are looking at is not a churn in world affairs, but possibly a tsunami in world affairs. Let me first very quickly focus on what has been happening in West Asia, in the Gaza war itself. Gaza is a very tiny strip. It is so small that many of the neighborhoods and towns in India would be larger than Gaza. It has a population of about 2.3 million, all of them Palestinians, but most of them refugees from previous conflicts that have taken place in this area between the Palestinians and the Israelis. To cover, the facts are clear before you. On 7th October, there was a dramatic assault upon Israeli targets by cadres from Hamas. About 1,200 Israelis were killed, 250 and odd were taken hostage. Since then, from that day till today, Israel has mounted a massive air attack and ground attack upon Gaza. We are told as of today, if you count the people killed over the last few days, more than 62,000 Palestinians have been killed. 70% of them are women and children. And then there has almost the entire infrastructure in that territory has been destroyed. There is a ceasefire that was agreed to in in January, just a day before Donald Trump became president. It was forced upon Hamas, forced upon Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, by the American Special Envoy. It has 3 phases. First phase has been completed, and Israel has now failed to pursue the second and third phases, and indeed has launched a fresh attack in violation of the ceasefire. Let us go back a little bit. Over the last 2 decades, the central personality in West Asian affairs, but certainly in Israel, has been Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister. He is a substantial presence. He is the longest serving Prime Minister in the country. He is regarded as an extraordinary survivor. Certain Israeli commentators have called him a magician, because whatever the set of circumstances, however adverse they may be to his interest, somehow it has been seen that he comes out at the lead role. Even when you think he has been defeated, suddenly you find he is back as Prime Minister. He is an extraordinarily wily, extremely intelligent person. There are certain negatives connected with him, as have emerged from writings by Israeli commentators. The main point that emerges, possibly he is not that different from most politicians, is totally committed to his own interest. So for him, the most important matter is the interest and survival and interest of Benjamin Netanyahu. He is also facing in Israel certain charges of criminal conduct, corruption, breach of promise, breach of office, what have you. Somehow he has ensured that the judicial process remains either non-existent or very slow moving. In any case, he has not been indicted. He attempted a couple of years ago, to change the law in Israel so that the cases would be dropped. But that evoked a huge set of protests against him. In December 2022, he formed a government of extreme right-wing elements. Extreme right-wing elements who represent the ultra-nationalist and the ultra-religious forces in the country have always been there, but they have been at the margins of the political order. But in order to obtain a majority so that he could be Prime Minister, he brought those elements into the government and gave them positions of responsibility. These people are known for their racist and xenophobic record, an extremely violent record. They are viscerally hostile to Palestinians, indeed have spoken the language of genocide even. One of them is the National Security Minister, the other is the Finance Minister with responsibility for the West Bank, the occupied territory. They are the ones who began from early 2023 undertaking a series of provocative events. There was encouragement to the settlers, Israeli settlers in the West Bank, and many of them they were given arms and they started attacking Palestinians. That means from January up to October 2023, more than 600 Palestinians had been killed in the West Bank. Then they started doing further provocations by desecrating the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is very holy to the Muslim community. This was the background within which you found that the uprising occurred, that the Hamas attack occurred. There was also news of a dialogue taking place between the Americans and the Saudis in order to promote Israeli-Saudi normalization of relations. It was just news, and we didn't know too much about what was happening. Later on, Biden said that the Hamas attack was timed to ensure that this agreement did not go through. I am skeptical about that. I believe that the Hamas attack would have been planned much earlier, and that it is perhaps coincidental that there was a relationship with the talks that were taking place. In any case, the news relating to those talks has largely come from American sources, and we cannot fully accept the authenticity of those remarks. What has happened? Much of this is known to you if you have followed the news. There has been not only conflict, massive assault upon Gaza, the war has spread. The axis of resistance led by Iran, which has been in place in West Asia over a period of time, has been activated, and there have been attacks upon Israel from non-state forces located in Lebanon, the Hezbollah, located in Iraq, located in Yemen itself. There have also been direct Israel-Iran attacks upon each other for the first time, though in April 2024 they were relatively restrained, more like capacity demonstrators rather than actual annihilation, actual war. It was a demonstration that we have the capacity to go forward. The criticisms relating to Israel's approach were there in diverse sources, including American sources. In the recent book called War, there is a report that Biden told Netanyahu that you are continuing these attacks upon Israel, upon Gaza, but you don't have an end game. You don't know where you want to do. You don't have a strategy. That is what Biden tells Netanyahu, and this is repeated in several places. That violence that you have initiated against Gaza, what is it that you seek to achieve? In what time frame? None of that has ever been apparent, and it appears to us that attack upon Gaza and Palestinians in general is an end in itself and is not connected with any other larger commitment or larger interest. There is a series of events that took place all through 2024 and early 2025. I have simply narrated them as facts, and I have called it Goliath trounces David, because in the power equation, obviously Israel is the Goliath in this scenario. You have Israel attacking various high-profile Palestinian and Hezbollah leaders. The killing of Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran in a calculated attack. Many of you will remember this attack in September when these various bombs exploded on the person of several Hezbollah activists, and many of them were killed. And then you find later in the month the killing of Hassan Nasrallah, the head of Hezbollah. That means these were very major lethal attacks of one of the most formidable enemies of Israel. It also had the impact of boosting Netanyahu's status in the country. We find that in January, as I mentioned, a ceasefire agreement in 3 phases was agreed to. In the first phase, there would be the release of hostages, certain number of hostages within a 6-week period. During this period, large numbers of Palestinians who were in Israeli custody would be released as well. And this process has gone on and continued up to early March. At that stage, we thought that they would now move into the second phase. The second phase provided for the total Israeli withdrawal from Gaza, Israeli forces. And then there would be detailed discussions about what would be the shape of affairs, administrative, military, political, in Gaza after this withdrawal. It now appears that Israel has never had any serious interest in implementing phase 2. This also posed a very serious problem for Netanyahu. Netanyahu had said that his war aim is to ensure the annihilation of Hamas. but it's very obvious that Hamas is not annihilated. Hamas is a militant movement, and militant movements by definition take huge casualties, both in terms of their leaders and their cadres, but they never actually disappear or go away. In the same book that I have mentioned earlier by Bob Woodward called War, Biden tells Netanyahu that your attack on Hamas is never going to succeed because Hamas is an idea. It is not just a movement that can be destroyed on the basis of military force. But Bob Woodward does not give us any reply as to what Netanyahu said. The Gaza blockade, we have seen over the last few weeks that even as this first phase ended and a large number of hostages had been released, some hostages still remain in Hamas custody, maybe 35 or 40. Israel has signaled that it has no interest in withdrawing from Gaza. On the other hand, it has reinforced the blockade so that no humanitarian assistance has been going into Gaza over the last 2 weeks or more. We should ask ourselves, what is the root cause of this conflict? This is something which very few people are familiar with because it requires an understanding which are the foundational belief systems that gave rise to the state of Israel. The most important element is that there is an inherent messianic belief that actually animates large numbers of Jewish people and has shaped the policies of the state of Israel. The first is that the Jews are a unique chosen people, chosen by God, and have been enabled. They are divinely chosen by God. It is God who has facilitated the return of the Jews to the promised land, the land promised to the Jewish people by God in the Old Testament, and that they have the right to live in this land to the exclusion of everyone else. So not just that the Jews are a chosen people, chosen divinely by God, but they are also endowed with control over a piece of territory that is also promised for the exclusive use of the Jewish people. This sacred land cannot be shared. Therefore, the people who live there, as understood from the Old Testament, can either be exterminated, or they can be exiled, or if they continue to remain, they can be enslaved, which is the short form of living as second-class citizens and periodically subjected to violence. This is why now the territory that constitutes the state of Israel has never been defined. The claim based on the Old Testament. At various times, different scholars and religious leaders have given different maps. If you go to the internet and you put Greater Israel or Eretz Israel, you will find numerous maps that have been put out from time to time. Israel is one of the rare countries in the world today that does not have a constitution. And the reason it doesn't have a constitution is because the first paragraph of any constitution defines the territories, the legal territories of that country. Israel has no wish whatsoever to define its territories. It keeps those options wide open. Today, when you have Israel's territories, they are the state of Israel that emerged in 1948. It also has 3 occupied territories from historic Palestine, that is West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem. One attempt was made to address these issues and to see how Israel and Palestine could accommodate their interests on the same piece of territory. This is referred to historically as the Oslo Accord. The Oslo Accords are a series of agreements that took place in the 1990s. These agreements were called initial or interim agreements. They set up that mutual recognition. the Israeli side recognized the Palestinians as a people and the Palestine Liberation Organization as the legitimate representative of the Palestinian people. In return, the Palestinians recognized Israel as a legal entity in the territories that had emerged in 1948 and which had the borders of 1967. That is Israel minus the occupied territories. Israel also allowed Palestine to set up an administrative arrangement in the West Bank and Gaza to manage municipal and other local affairs relating to those territories. And therefore you have a Palestine Authority that emerged in Ramallah. After that it was thought that within a 5-year period the two sides would meet again and they would agree on what are called final status issues. The final status issues are 3. Number 1, that there will be a legal and sovereign and economically credible state of Palestine in the occupied territories. Number 2, this entity will have East Jerusalem as its capital. And number 3, those Palestinians and their descendants who were deprived of their homes in the 1948 and 1967 war will have a right of return. These are referred to as final status issues. There has been only one attempt to discuss these issues. This is referred to as Camp David II, which took place at Camp David after the elections of year 2000 when the Democrats were defeated. This was an attempt by President Clinton to bring together Ehud Barak, the Prime Minister of Israel, and Yasser Arafat, the leader of the PLO. But Ehud Barak offered a lot to the Palestinians, but could not address even minimally their final status issues. He offered more territory in West Bank, but it was not sovereign territory. There was no way, based on the messianic commitments of the Jewish people, there was no way Ehud Barak could offer sovereignty to the Palestinians. Because recall here, this sacred land is not to be shared with the non-Jewish people. Therefore, the question of a sovereign state does not arise whatsoever. He offered more territory. He could not even offer East Jerusalem and certainly could not recognize the right of return. It is in this background. Please recall, I should have mentioned this earlier, as soon as the Oslo Accords were agreed to, an extreme right-wing individual assassinated Rabin, who had negotiated these agreements, indicating that the right wing in Israel did not accept even this minimal accommodation of the Palestinian people. After the assassination of Rabin, there has been no attempt by any Israeli leader to discuss the final status issues. Therefore, for 25 years, this matter has festered. What has happened is that in the occupied territories themselves, there has been a systematic change in their status. Number 1, that in the case of the West Bank, there has been a steady expansion of Jewish settlements, and the number of Jews now living in the West Bank has increased exponentially. There are 140 Jewish establishments, settlements as they are called in the West Bank, which now accommodate more than 700,000 people. In East Jerusalem, which is supposed to be the capital of a Palestine state, there has been a steady removal of Palestinians and steady increase in the presence of the Jewish people. In the case of Gaza, the Israelis thought that it is unviable to occupy this territory. They withdrew from Gaza in 2006. So there is no Jewish presence in Gaza, but they have blockaded Gaza from the very beginning. That means it is subject to land, sea and air blockade. Therefore, it is referred to as an open-air prison. Its unemployment is more than 50% and young people's unemployment is more than 70%. as a sideshow, I talked to you very quickly about what happened in Gaza. We were all of us very surprised when, as a sideshow, we found a sudden regime change in Syria. Why it is significant? It is because Syria and the leader Bashar Assad had been a very close supporter of Iran. He and his father have been allied with Iran over the last 50 or so years. That is the fall of Bashar Assad, given the background of Israeli attacks on Hezbollah as well as on Hamas and Hezbollah, both formidable elements. The fall of Bashar Assad is in itself a major setback for the axis of resistance against Israel. Therefore, you find, I won't go into details about what led to the fall of Bashar Assad. The fact remains that his armed forces were not able to defend him. There is a lot of speculation as to what happened. It is still very early days. It is astonishing. In the case of Syria, you had a civil conflict from 2011. There have been external role players supporting various factions. There had been a jihadi group that was initially part of the Islamic State of Iraq, but had declared independence. That is Jabhat Nusra, led by Abu Muhammad Jolani. Abu Muhammad Jolani finally found sanctuary in a small part of Syria in the town of Idlib in northwest Syria, and basically disappeared from our attention because the Arab world started accommodating Bashar Assad in the Arab fold. That means earlier hostility to him and his regime had been done away with. See, the Russians had come to his assistance with their own intelligence and infantry and artillery support, and along with the Iranians. As a result, his regime had been saved and the attempt to replace him had failed. Turkey, separately from all this, had problems with the Kurds in Syria and had entered into Syrian territory quite deep, about 50 kilometers or so, in order to maintain a watch on the Kurds in the northeast of the country. And yet you find quite suddenly at the end of November that this same Abu Muhammad Jolani starts changing his persona and strolls into Damascus, and within a few weeks declares himself the new president of the country. He also declares that he is no longer a jihadi and that he will now be a moderate leader of Syria. We are puzzled. What was it that led to this? Within a few hours of this change, I was interviewed by Mr. Karan Thapar. I had at that time no first-hand knowledge of what had happened, but I had made the statement to him on record saying that this is a joint conspiracy of Turkey, Israel and the United States. Now, these months later, I continue to believe that is indeed the case. I do not believe that this major change in Syria could have taken place without the coming together and coordination between these three countries. It is Turkey that was the principal supporter of the jihadis in Idlib, was part of their change in approach. We now also know that the Americans were engaged with Abu Muhammad Jolani, who now calls himself Ahmad Shara. He was changing his persona. We now know that there were people who met him, to talk to him, encouraged him with the support. The American agenda was basically and remains to give a mortal blow to Iran and Russia, both for strategic reasons. That means the competition and conflict that is taking place between the American-led world order and the world order reflected by the alignment of China, Russia and Iran, this is partly manifested in Syria itself. I think that Israel was kept informed. Israel's priorities were to hammer Hezbollah and Hamas and to confront Iran. Israel would have been satisfied if Iranian influence and presence was diluted as far as Syria is concerned. But the active role, to my mind, was played by Turkey. And it is now a month or 2 months later, it is Ahmad Shara who is now representing Syria. You find he has visited a number of capitals, including Riyadh. He has also met various people. Various Arab embassies have reopened in Damascus. He appears to have been accepted as the leader. What troubled many of us was that just a few days ago, there was a very major civil conflict. I have argued, and I believe, that Ahmad Shara, while supported by such major external role players, is not yet in control of his country. And that these conflicts have not been addressed. And from time to time, they will recover. But we don't know another thing about him. Who is he? We are told that this jihadi has overnight changed his stripes and is today a moderate person, a statesman-like character, merely because he has changed his clothes and now wears a suit with a natty tie. All of these are mysterious developments. This is also work in progress. We still don't know which way things will go. We keep an eye and we remain skeptical. Let us now look at some of the matters. Now I will share with you some personal reflections on what has happened so far. These are, as I said, personal reflections, and since the conflict is still ongoing, new information may change some of the observations that I share with you. But as of now, I believe this. Netanyahu, who had lost a lot of credibility at home because of the failure, the political and military failure to defend the Israeli people on 7th October, appears to have recovered a lot of his lost standing. The fact that he could hold his own against Hezbollah and Hamas, kill a very large number of high-profile leaders, including Yahya Sinwar of Hamas, all of this has redounded to his advantage, and he is largely recovering his status within the country. But there are other things that we have to note. Very few of us had observed how influential the extreme right wing is in Israel. Israel has projected itself as a liberal and democratic country. Indeed, the old mantra relating to Israel has been, it is the only democracy in West Asia. Those of us who have followed Israeli affairs never accepted this, because though they have 20% Palestinian people who are their citizens, they are treated as second-class and third-class citizens. So there cannot be a democracy where your own citizens are divided on the basis of their identity. Secondly, we were always concerned. We knew that there is a right wing. They are ultra-religious and ultra-nationalist. They are extremely lethal and extremely xenophobic and racist. We knew they exist, but their presence was hidden away. We knew they were influential, but their presence was hidden away. Now you can see over the last year and a half how influential the right wing is in Israel. It is a country dominated by extreme zealots. Up to now, large sections of the Muslim community used to be condemned as jihadi. And I had said a few years ago that these jihadis are the mirror image of the zealots in Israel. But because very few people knew about these zealots, we were never able to carry credibility. Now it is true. It is exposed that it is an extremely violent bunch of people, and that Israel has no compunction whatsoever with regard to inflicting the maximum possible harm to the people in the name of annihilating Hamas. 70% of the victims are women and children in this regard. The other thing that we have noticed is Israel has been projected as a formidable military force. But this conflict has shown, and shown very clearly and dramatically, Israel cannot survive for a day without American military support. All that you read about Israel's formidable armed forces are a product of total American support. America has formed a military bridge between the United States and Israel, and there are numerous flights that carry weapons to Israel almost on a daily basis, valued at several $billions. So that the Israeli dependence on the United States has been reaffirmed. But what we have at the same time seen is that this is a relationship that is overwhelmingly one-sided. There is no capacity within the United States to question anything the Israelis do. The Israelis' maximalist agenda of war and harm and conflict and damage, all of this takes place with the full knowledge and approval of the American presidents. The American political order has been so structured today that the right wing in the United States is a total blind supporter, but even in the period of the Democratic President Biden, they did not have any capacity whatsoever to restrain Netanyahu in terms of the conflict. But the fact is that this period has also seen very cautiously, very warily, that there is a shift in world opinion. The kind of blind support that the Americans give to Israel is today being questioned in many other places. I'm not going to pretend to you that the Western Alliance is going to give up on Israel, not at all. Western Alliance, which I will explain in a short while, has its own issues, which have much less to do with Israel and much more to do with what is happening in Europe, which we will touch upon in a very short while. The tsunami that I referred to right at the beginning is what bothers them much more than what is happening in West Asia. But for us, the two events are linked, and I will talk about that in a very short while. Most people during this period have talked about their commitment to the two-state solution. The two-state solution in terms of which the final status issues will be addressed, and there will be a sovereign Palestinian state that will emerge from the occupied territories. There is a commitment. It is a statement. But actually there is no capacity whatsoever in world order today to push it forward and to see it through. What are we likely to see for now? Extraordinary uncertainty. As I speak to you, we do not know. We have seen that Israel has now restarted the assault upon Gaza. Is this, we ask ourselves, the doing of a major, mature, civilized military force that pounds a refugee community with bombs, a refugee community that has no capacity to defend itself, and the overwhelming majority of whose victims are women and children? You have seen the pictures all over again, and it's like a nightmare that has now reopened in our minds. This is something that we have to ask ourselves. But there is also an indication that a triumphant Israel may now push harder both in Gaza and in West Asia and in the West Bank to achieve what has been its original purpose, and that is to depopulate these territories and to expand Jewish presence in these territories. This is a problem area. If you were to see the numbers we are talking about, in the West Bank there are 3.6 million Palestinians, and in the Gaza there are 2.3 million Palestinians, and there are another 500,000 in the East Jerusalem, and there are 20% Palestinians who are Israeli citizens. Taken all these together, it is very likely that the numbers that they have of non-Jews far exceeds the Jews. If you take into account the Jewish population of 6 million plus in state of Israel and you take into account the population of Palestinians who are in the West Bank, Gaza, East Jerusalem and citizens, it is very likely 7 million. That means Israel's claim to be a Jewish state is compromised and diluted by the fact that it is a minority in these territories. What has been the very strong dream of the Israeli extremists and zealots? Somehow Palestinians should disappear from these territories. They should just evaporate so that we are able to stretch ourselves into the West Bank and into Gaza. The idea has been for at least 40 or 50 years that somehow the West Bank people go into Jordan, the East and Gaza people go into the Sinai. What you found, what were totally obnoxious dreams of depopulating people some years ago, have today come into the forefront of discussion because they have been encouraged by Donald Trump himself. Where Donald Trump speaks of depopulating Gaza and creating a world standard Riviera in this despoiled territory. This is where we are today in terms of the outlook. The short term. Now let us look at the longer term. Again I must stress to you, we are in the throes of the events themselves. It is not the aftermath where you get a little bit of leisure, where you can think through the implications of everything that you have seen and experienced. We do not know, since it is an ongoing conflict. But on the face of it, it would appear that Iran and its axis of resistance has been very severely damaged. I would not say to you it has disappeared, because militants rarely disappear. They have extraordinary surviving power. As Biden mentioned to Netanyahu, and as we know ourselves, that the militancy is the product of a certain claim or cause. And till that claim or cause is addressed, one way or the other, they will continue. What we know full well is that no militant movement in the world can be eliminated as a result of security action alone. Security action can sometimes force a discussion. But for a discussion, there have to be two sides, and each side must be willing to sacrifice something to accommodate the other. Absent this mutual accommodation, there is unlikely to be a settlement. Therefore, I would say to you that regardless of what has taken place in Gaza and in regard to Hezbollah, I don't think you should write off any of these movements whatsoever. The issues that they represent and the claims that they assert are those that are still resonant and still very much on the table. What about the role of state players in this regard? Iran is attempting very strongly at this time to recover its strategic capacity, having lost its allies in different places. You will see, it has made a very major effort to reach out to China and Russia and to reaffirm its ties with other countries of Asia. And that is where we are today, and I will discuss the implications of this in a minute. Saudi Arabia has been prioritizing its economic changes and economic reforms. It is today under pressure. It had shrugged off American influence and was asserting strategic autonomy. But in this scenario of Donald Trump's presidency, there is likely to be tremendous pressure upon Saudi Arabia to accommodate Israel as part of normalization and shrug off again its strategic autonomy and become part of the Western alliance. Will this go forward? Very difficult to say. My sense as of now is that at least for the next couple of years, I do not see the possibility of a Saudi-Israeli normalization. Saudi Arabia will also make every effort to ensure that its strategic autonomy, as if for now at least, is not diluted. What happens beyond 2 years, I would not be able to say, because it will depend on what occurs in the next couple of years. There will be other role players in the region, Qatar and UAE, both of them active. One of them has normalized ties with Israel, that is UAE, and the other, Qatar, is projecting itself as a mediator. How influential they will be, how they see forward the interests of the people of the region, that remains to be seen. On their own, they are not particularly effective. They are very small countries. They can offer good offices. They can offer a platform for dialogue. They cannot themselves push forward a settlement without the big powers backing them. Where are we therefore looking? What are we therefore looking at in terms of West Asia? In terms of West Asia, you will have a series of players, but their role is not clear. Iran, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Israel, and Egypt. What kind of role will they have? You will find that they will be very much under pressure from the United States to accommodate American interests. To what extent will they be accommodated? Will Trump be able to push forward his agenda on the basis of his overt aggressiveness? Or will his aggressiveness be found offensive and irritating and possibly unreliable, and these countries will decide it's far better to remain low-key rather than do anything that this person asks for, because he remains unpredictable. A leader who is unpredictable, and a leader who can change his mind, and a leader who comes with no intellectual ballast or gravitas, is not a leader that you can rely upon. A leader who moves from a tweet to another tweet and struts very aggressively on the world stage as an end in itself is not someone that you can attach yourself to in terms of your long-term interests. This is what I feel as of now. What is likely to be the scenario relating to Israel? Again, very difficult to say. Israel looks very triumphalist at this time, but again you must note that large numbers of people, both in the United States as well as in Israel, large numbers of Jewish people are today alienated from Netanyahu. The idea is that Netanyahu is today only serving himself, that the continued conflict in the region and the absence of priority being attached to the hostages indicates that he needs conflict. He needs the continuation of war. In Foreign Affairs, the latest issue of Foreign Affairs, the headline of the article is, does Netanyahu need conflict for personal survival? Or can he survive without conflict? And that is a question that we ask ourselves. Because now he is fighting with his own domestic intelligence agency head. Because these intelligence agency leaders are counseling restraint, counseling accommodation. Their counsel goes beyond the self-interest of the Israeli Prime Minister. And therefore it leads us that, can you see for the foreseeable future any change? Very possibly not. In the 4 years that you have Donald Trump, there is no indication that Trump could put himself forward as a major role player towards peacemaking in the region. I am a skeptic. Let me make it very clear to you. As far as Donald Trump is concerned, I do not take him seriously as a player in world affairs because he is not reliable. He is not predictable. Posturing becomes an end in itself. And if it is posturing that you are going to applaud and look up to, then I am not sure that is the hallmark of a statesman. And that is what I would say at this stage, that I am not someone who can trust. I do not trust Trump to do the right thing in a complex set of circumstances. I have put this slide very carefully just because all of you would want to know, what does all this mean for India? The problem is that India has developed very close ties with all the countries of the region. India also has very deep interest in the stability of the region. Our energy security depends on supplies of oil and gas from the region, 80%. We have 8.5 million people who live in the region who send home $40 billion every year. The one person legally employed in the Gulf supports at least 4 people at home. So that over 40 million people of Indian origin, of Indian nationals, actually are directly benefiting from the opportunities that have been provided by the Gulf. We also see for India, the GCC is a very major trade partner. It is a very major investment partner. It is a very major logistical connectivity partner. All of these factors, ladies and gentlemen, should make it clear to us that this is a region that needs to be stable if India's interests are to be subserved. And persons like me have for the last decade or so been agitating as academics for an Indian role that would promote peace and stability in the region. This is not to advocate a military role. I am not suggesting that Indian armed forces should go out and participate in expeditions in various places where India is not involved. No. I am talking about a diplomatic initiative, a peacemaking initiative, an initiative that brings together like-minded countries that counsel restraint in the region. Very often I am asked that what role do you prescribe for India? And the role that I prescribe to India is a diplomatic initiative that promotes peace and stability in the region. I am not talking about solutions. Solutions are very far away. Just peace and stability as an immediate objective is not to be ruled out. When the crisis between Israel and Iran was burgeoning, and Israel was talking the language of a military assault and was saying that they are going to work with the Americans to attack the Iranian facilities, at that time I was asked my role, what should be India's role, and I said it should counsel Netanyahu against going in for any main expansion of the conflict. No conflict in the region can be isolated from the various events in the region itself. There will be a region-wide conflagration. And as simple as this point, that in the first few days of the conflict, several thousand Indians will be casualties. That itself should focus our mind on what we should be doing. Up to now, my criticism used to be that India's approach to the region is bilateral. That means we do not look at the region as a collective, as a security concern. But India has changed this. In October last year, Indian Foreign Minister, External Affairs Minister, actually had a dialogue with the 6 foreign ministers of the Gulf Cooperation Council and have come up with an action plan for joint effort in the region. I would like to see this plan implemented robustly so that India becomes a role player in the region. And this is what I would say should be India's role. My last point to you, ladies and gentlemen, is this. Some broad reflections. The reflections are as follows. The tsunami in world affairs is now a reality. It needed Donald Trump's presence and disorderliness to drive home this point to us. Otherwise, we tend to be complacent within the comfort of our space. We tend to ignore these major developments. But Trump has made it clear to us that the world affairs that we have taken for granted may not exist for long. Let me clarify all of these points. The Western powers led by the United States deliberately expanded NATO eastwards in order to ensure that Russia is surrounded, Russia is threatened and is not able to pose a threat to the West ever again. That means it was a post-Cold War expansion at a time when Russia itself was relatively vulnerable. that is not the case. Russia under Putin has made it very clear that they will not be intimidated, and this eastward expansion of NATO, which means very often that NATO members can point missiles at various targets in Russia, this is not acceptable. This is a red line as far as Russia is concerned. But regardless of these red lines, the American administration pushed into the east and indicated that Ukraine would become a NATO member against Russian counsels. The Ukraine war is a direct result of this, with major warnings that had come from the Russians. The war has taken huge casualties. Now you see with the change of president, there is a change of policy. And the poor Ukrainians are abandoned. Look at Europe. Europe had no interest in a war. But because of the American intervention, not only were they made part of an alliance against Russia, active alliance against Russia, their long-standing energy relationship with Russia had to be given up. They took a very big beating. Their economies have suffered very severely, and they are almost all of them going through a domestic political crisis. Crisis fraught with uncertainties because you have the rise of the extreme right wing in all the major European countries. It is in this background that Donald Trump has now conveyed to the Europeans that the United States is not as close to them as they may have wished. He dislikes NATO. He has made loose remarks about NATO. He has indicated very obviously that he has no interest in supporting Ukraine, and he has also made it very clear that he would rather do a deal with the Russians than remain close to the Western. That means the Western alliance, which was a reality all through the Cold War and in the 25 years after the Cold War, is today extremely fragile and likely to be in jeopardy. It is like a huge hammer blow has been delivered to Europe. They are today completely lost. This is the tsunami that they have got. Come now to West Asia. The American support to Israel has meant the systematic annihilation of the Iranian presence and the Iranian debilitation. It has meant Iran, which has been a major enemy of the Americans in West Asia, today is now looking very, very weak. Now you are seeing the shaping, advertent or inadvertent, of a certain scenario in the world. At the apex level, United States has identified China as their principal rival. This rivalry is geopolitical, diplomatic, economic, and technological. All of these taken together, China seems to be a formidable presence. Certainly it is not the equal of the United States or even a near equal. The power asymmetry still remains very significant. But China is seen as the emerging power at the global level. And China, from the American perspective, it is a zero-sum game. Any achievement of China is seen as a setback for the Americans. From the American perspective, the world is not big enough for the two of them. If China has to continue to be a player in world affairs, it must become a subordinate to the Americans. This is not going to happen. So you are looking at, you have seen over the last decade, a closer affinity between China and Russia. Iran, because of the hostility to the Americans, is slowly going into this camp. And you can also add to this North Korea. That means you are looking at a world which is looking increasingly confrontational. It is not a benign scenario. It is a scenario of deep concern because the leader from the Western side is someone who is not reliable. His capacity for his capacity for action that is unpredictable, and that he is not committed to any remark. If he has made a certain commitment on day 1, on day 2 he can correct it and say, oops, I changed my mind. You are looking at this tsunami, therefore, a confrontation. West Asia is likely to be a major theatre for this kind of competition. China has very high stakes in West Asia. Similar to India, it depends on the region for its energy. It has very substantial economic ties with the region. It has very, very substantial technological presence in the region as well. Plus it has the idea of a logistical connectivity project, the Belt and Road Initiative, that involves very close ties with the countries of West Asia. I would therefore say to you that West Asia will be a very major theatre of East-West competition. What shape it will take remains to be seen, because I do not know what policies China will adopt. China up to now has adopted a low-key approach. Friend to all, it calls this hedging. Hedging is when you don't commit yourself either on this side or on that side, you sit on the hedge. And that is where China has been. I would say to you that the Gulf War no longer allows the luxury of hedging. That there is too much that has changed in the region, and now the time, to my mind, has come where China has to be more clear as to where it positions itself in the coming competitions. Beyond this high level of competition, you have another source of churn. This is literally the churn. And this is the jostling by middle powers for their own space and influence in world affairs. You have Japan, Korea, Malaysia, Indonesia, Australia, India, Iran, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Israel. These are middle powers. You also have middle powers from Europe who are coming into this space. France has sent its navy. The Germans are looking at with great interest. The Americans are putting together a maritime alignment against China in the Indian Ocean. But the Chinese and the Russians are attracting more and more Middle East partners in the Belt and Road, Middle East partners in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and in BRICS. You are looking at intense competition. The countries that are middle powers, not the European ones, but certainly in large numbers in Asia, except Japan and Korea and Australia, are likely to want to stay out of competition and conflict. They accept the idea that there is a competition at the apex level, but they don't want this to become a second Cold War, a new Cold War. They would like to have close ties with all the countries. And this is where we are going to be in the coming era. As far as West Asia is concerned, I asked myself this question as I presented before you. Can the world give a license to Israel to kill because of the guilt they have for the Holocaust and the mistreatment of Jews in Europe by Christians for 2000 years? This guilt trip relating to the Holocaust is what has given Israel the total freedom to annihilate the Palestinians and anyone else before them. Is there a use-by date for the Holocaust? Is there a day when this can end and other countries say, look, this will not continue? We do not know if that is indeed the case. On the contrary, you are looking at the prospect of a forever war. To be reflective here, if you look at this whole territory of West Asia, you have seen the rise and fall of peoples, and you have seen the rise and fall of empires. You have had the destinies of this region shaped by four people: the Persian, the Arab, the Jew, and the Turk. And periodically powers from the West have intervened in the affairs of this region. Earlier it was the Asian people who were triumphant. The Persians occupied large parts of Greece, as did the Ottomans many centuries later. Large parts of the Balkans, Therefore you had an Asian domination. The Romans had come into West Asia, annihilated the Jews, destroyed their second temple, and sent them into the diaspora. 1900 years later they came back, and in 1948 proclaimed the state of Israel, so that they are now once again players in the region from where they had been dispersed. So the fortunes of peoples have changed. Those which were great empires floundered, new empires came in. There was a period in regional affairs where you had three major Muslim empires, the Mughal, the Safavid, and the Ottoman. All of these empires have now ceased to exist, and you have in their place a very large number of states, very large number of divided people, very often feuding principally with each other. Western powers continue to be players in the region, if not as colonialists, certainly with imperial mindset and agenda. It is said that an imperialism ends. The first thing to change is the political, the second thing to change is the economic, and the third thing, which hardly ever changes, is the intellectual. Today, even 75 years after our freedom, we led the freedom of Asia in 1947. Many of us still have mindsets that are not entirely independent of external influence. And today many of us are lured by the West and asked to support their own agenda in terms of their technological capacity, which some of us very happily accept. There is an absence of clarity of who we are and what we wish to be. We are today experiencing a new debate as to the idea of India. The idea of India is jostled between different ideas, and from time to time new ideas come up. But the only message I will leave to you, ladies and gentlemen, in this period of tsunami, in this period of extraordinary uncertainty, in this period of extraordinary violence and animosity, the only matter, the only approach that will see India through is the overwhelming unity of its diverse people. Let me pause here at this point. I thank you for your patience and your attention, and I am available for any questions that any one of you may wish to have over the next few minutes. Thank you very much.
Hello.
Good afternoon, sir. Thank you for the lecture. It has enlightened me and sparked questions in my head, which I could not have thought otherwise. My name is Haritsa Chatterjee, and I had two questions. The first is a little technical. We have at length talked about the end goals of Netanyahu and Israel through this war. He says it is the annihilation of Hamas, and when Biden tells him that Hamas can't be annihilated, I hope and I think Netanyahu is a political leader smart enough, with a team smart enough to understand that the annihilation of Hamas is not really the end goal. So the question is, what is the end goal? Is it the annihilation of the Palestine in itself and the Palestinians in Gaza? Why I ask this is it because of the consequence of the 1940s war in itself? Why I was going through the Israel-Palestine conflict, and what I came across was the Ben Gurion Canal. America is directly supporting Israel in this, while they do not have any stakes directly. What I find is that America has stakes because it has the conflict with Egypt in itself, and the Suez Canal has been blocked for America twice already. So America wants a canal in which it does not have to give as much tax as the Suez Canal already. So you understand the American interest. And for making this canal, you know that it has to go through Gaza. And this canal cannot be made as long as there are Palestinians in Gaza. So is that an ulterior motive? Is that a reason why America is supporting? This is the first question. The second is a comparative I found, and it's really scary. When it talks about Eretz Israel, it almost sounds like Lebensraum to me. And when we talk about the land of Israel, the greater Israel, it's scary that it sounds like the Nazi Germany's idea of Aryan supremacy. What is even more scary if it's today in India also, we talk about the Hindu Rashtra and the process taken Hindutva. So we have seen that in these two cases, in both the Germany and Israel, where we have thought about a mystic creature, in their cases the Aryans and in the Israel is the Jews, there have been violence and war in itself. So is India looking forward to something similar?
I'll take 2 or 3 more questions and then respond to them together.
Hello sir, thank you for your lecture. As you have stated, because of the Holocaust, Israel was given a free rein when in dealing with a lot of issues. Especially the Western hegemony has allowed Israel to commit various atrocities throughout the time. But we are seeing that, especially in the public opinions, some polls are showing that, especially in teenagers and 18 to 34 year age group, the opinion of Israel has been changing. As we have seen throughout the period of the Israel-Palestinian conflict, there have been various protests going on across the world by various students and various organizations. And we've also seen that internationally, the International Criminal Court has also issued warrants against the higher authorities of Israel. So do you think there is any chance that the Western hegemony will be more restrained when dealing with Israel? Will Israel face more restrictions in the future? Will these actions limit the Israel's actions in the future? This is what
Yes, miss.
Good afternoon, sir. My question would be, is the Gulf really reliant on India's position in all of this, or would they also want to keep things as dormant as possible, because relations between India and Gulf have shown to be relatively well. So would they want us to be yet another pole to this entire conflict?
Yes, the US.
I'm talking about India. India's role.
India's role. Who wants us to be a role player?
Are the Gulf nations really looking forward to India's role?
Good afternoon, sir. Thank you for your lecture. I am Arnav Raj. And sir, I had a very similar question. Basically, I wanted to ask, how can we say that India is a better mediator, or maybe India should be a mediator in a place where there is already a mediator like Qatar, and that Qatar is seeing this first hand, it is a part of the region, then why do we need India as a mediator in that scenario? And
problem solver, then how and in what manner can we help them?
See, Netanyahu had said that the elimination of
Good afternoon, sir. I'm highly grateful for your lecture. It has been a very enlightening one. I wanted to ask a question that after the tipping point of the Russia-Ukraine war, where there was a massive tug of war between resource allocation, which is specifically like natural gas and oil, how much do you think that the Middle East area or the West Asia is going to be crucial in those kind of resource facilitation, and how much those kind of resource facilitation and need for the resources is going to play in the regional politics of those areas? Like we have seen US invading Iraq due to regions like oil monopoly, and also we have seen like US being more and less loose with its approach to Saudi Arabia's dictatorial regime and its own non-democratic nature of working. So how much does this kind of things like resources play a role in this conflict of the entire Middle East?
You are asking to what extent is oil a factor?
To what extent the allocation of oil resources and natural gas, because Russia in itself has hampered the Western nations and also the US economy now that we are seeing that the economy is sliding and it is impacting the whole global world. So how much is this impact?
Okay. Let's start from the beginning. Netanyahu declared annihilation of Hamas as the end game and unleashed a massive air and ground assault upon Gaza. All of us know that it is almost impossible to distinguish a Hamas fighter from the ordinary people. The Israelis made no attempt whatsoever to distinguish one Palestinian from another. The mass murder of Palestinians became an end in itself. From time to time, when the American president talked about a ceasefire, Netanyahu would say that Hamas's cadres are 40,000. We've already killed 20.